Hi, Tim Caffrey, founder of Northern Colorado Progressives and your host for today's show. This is a second in a series of shows that is examining the question, is organized labor relevant in 21st century America? Today's topic will examine the question, does outsourcing American jobs affect working class America? Kevin Caffrey, president of the Northern Colorado Labor Council, will explain to me how outsourcing affects small businesses all across Colorado. That's next on the Tim Caffrey Show. Joining me now is Kevin Caffrey, president of the Northern Colorado Labor Council. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you for coming back on the show again.
Thanks for inviting me, Tim.
Kevin, today's topic I want to talk about is outsourcing and the myths of free trade and things of that nature. I think it's very important that we look at corporations now are talking more and more about how their profits are going up. The stock market is going back up. Even President Obama has stated that he's happy with the direction that the economy is going. The unemployment has dropped down to 9%, but yet there's a nagging out there of that there's still a lot of unemployed people. So where are the jobs, I guess, is the question I'll ask you. Where are the jobs, Kevin?
Well, we've got them in the service sector, but that's not really sustainable. And we don't make anything in this country anymore. You know, I mean, you go into any clothing store with the, probably if you go to a car dealership, that's the exception to it. You know, you can still get probably an American-made car, but for how long? We don't know. I mean, just closer to home here, let me just tell you about what the Commerce Department talks about here. Between 2006 and 2008, foreign subsidiaries and affiliates of U.S. multinational firms grew by 730,000 to a total of almost 12 million workers, while the same period domestic employment by such firms slipped by 500,000 jobs to 21.1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. I mean, you've got companies that are located here in town. Hewlett-Packard, they laid off undisclosed number of human resource employees in California and 9 other states. What'd they do? They transferred those jobs to Panama. Those aren't American jobs anymore. Also moving was to popular places. Companies are moving white-collar and blue-collar jobs to where? The Philippines, where J.P. Morgan Chase's telephone banking operations that used to be in Troy, Michigan. Now they're in the Philippines. And it just goes on and on and on. I don't know how many people have called and tried to get service for their Dell computer, or they've called some financial company that they've used, and they're talking. I know I talked to somebody the other day for my Sirius satellite radio I have in my car, and I asked the gentleman, he sounded like he had a little bit of an accent, and found out that he's in Egypt. And it was just before this unrest happened over there, and I called back the next day, and everything was kind of in unrest over there, so I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And I got into a little bit of a conversation with the gentleman, found out it was a 9-hour difference from where we're at in Colorado. You know, it was in the afternoon here, and it was, 9 hours ahead where he was at. And he told me, I thought this was kind of interesting, that he drives by the, I mentioned to him that I thought the pyramids were, such a great, engineering feat of their country. And he said, yeah, I think so too. I drive by them every day going to work. So there you have it. I mean, it's just unreal.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people say that it's just inevitable that outsourcing is going to happen to China or to India. But I don't think they really understand the effect that it has here at home in the United States. That there's one article that I was reading by EPI, titled the Burden of Outsourcing, where Colorado lost 68,100 jobs just in 2007 due to non-oil trade deficits, basically, with India and China. So, I mean, how do you feel about the direction that this outsourcing is going, and what effect it has on here in Fort Collins?
Well, you can see it here in Fort Collins. I mean, I know probably everyone has a neighbor that has worked in high tech, or they have themselves worked in high tech, and they've had a neighbor that lost their job there. And you can kind of see the trend now. Being here going on 33 years, I remember talking to high tech workers, whether they worked at HP or Avago or anywhere else, and you noticed that they'd be missing. You didn't see them for a while. They'd come back. You might run into them at the health club or around town at the grocery store, and, hey, Fred, where you been? And they'd tell me that they'd been to to India, or they'd been to Singapore or someplace like that. And I'm like, what for? Well, this was back 25 years ago, and at that time, the word hadn't really got out what they were doing, but they were basically training their counterpart in that other country. And pretty soon you'd ask them, where you been, what have you been doing? And they didn't work at that company anymore, because the person that they were going over, or the group of people that they were going over and talking to about the job they had in this country, they were basically training the person that was going to take over for them. And we have a situation in this country where if we try to export the same type of things that they make, let's say auto parts that they make in China, we would try to export auto parts to China. There's huge tariffs. They protect their jobs. Now we accept their imports into this country, whether they be from Japan or China, and there's little or no tariff, and sometimes we even subsidize that and give them money back. So we can't, there is no such thing as free trade, other than if we want to, see our country keep spiraling down, into a third world status. You can't. I know on the railroad, one of our biggest things that we ship now is coal. And you'd say, well, where? To what power plant in the United States? Well, we do a lot of that too, but a lot of the coal now is being exported where? To China, because every week they're putting on a new coal-fired power plant. And we just, that direction that we're going, where you send raw materials to another country so that they can add value to it and then sell it back to us, it's just not sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I thought was interesting, where there was a commercial for Chrysler that was on the Super Bowl, where Green Bay Packers just recently won, go, the pack is back. But what I wanted to say was that, according to this article, this EPI, where it was titled The Burden of Outsourcing, just two industries, motor vehicles and parts, was $123.5 billion, and computer and electronic parts accounted for $121.3 billion. Both of those accounted for more than half of the $473 billion non-oil trade deficit in 2007. Now, the reason I think this is interesting, because the Republicans and the conservatives will tell you that it's the deficit that this country is running up is a travesty, is an outrage, and we have to stop that. But yet, on the same token, they'll sit there and tell you outsourcing is good, it's okay, ship the jobs elsewhere. How do you feel about that, Kevin?
Well, I just have to ask my fellow neighbors, in the high-tech industry, how they like it. Mm-hmm. How do you like your job being done cheaper in India, where they protect their workforce, their country? And now, granted, they make a lot less than we do, but I know when a big box store tried to go to India, and most of Indian business is done in small business, mm-hmm. Okay? So when this big box store tried to go over there and invade that country and put them on every street corner like they have here, because they saw, hey, a billion some customers there. Wow, we'll make a ton of money. They go, no. We protect small business. We've got small grocery stores here. We've got, small business that sell clothing and sporting goods and all kinds of things. They protected that, and they said, "You're not going to come here. You're not going to devastate our small business." So that's protecting. And if we do it in this country, we're called, un-American. So we have to rethink where we're going in this direction. And ask ourselves, is it sustainable? Can we go and let our high-paying jobs go to another country, and then we just receive the goods that they make in that country, and they bring them back here, and we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to pay for them? How are we going to stay in the middle class? You brought up an interesting point with the Chrysler commercial, and I kind of got a little bit of a lump in my throat. I thought, this is what America is about. We make something here, in Detroit. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a great commercial, but there were people that didn't. And I can tell you who they are on right-wing radio. Mm-hmm. I listened to some of the stations, and some of these conservative talkers were just beating that up. It was like it was un-American to make it in America now. And I'm going, wow, is that a Machiavellian type of thing to tell us that something that we know is good isn't? Night is day and day is night. I thought it was a fantastic commercial. Matter of fact, I drive a Chrysler vehicle, and it's a great product. It was union made, and I haven't had any trouble whatsoever. Now, I'm not trying to do a commercial for Chrysler here. Yeah. But I think that if we're going to walk around with flags in the air and talk about how we're so patriotic, I think American workers making things in this country the way they did during World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam, in order for us to win, in World War II, we made tanks in GM plants and Ford plants and Chrysler plants. When we're not making anything here, when we don't produce steel here or anything like that, how are we going to defend ourselves in the future, when that technology's gone? And you don't just start up a steel factory overnight when you decide that, maybe you have a country like, I hope it never comes to this, to China or some other major power, Russia again. And what are we going to say? What are we going to ask China to take a break and make our steel for us, for our tanks or our weaponry? I mean, it's a point of national security. Yeah. To have these industries and to keep them vital.
Well, we've got a little bit less than a minute left, but I thought something was interesting that you said that, because Fort Collins does have a lot of high-tech people around here, and when they get let go, a lot of times you hear them say, well, I've been laid off, and I know that, you've worked for a union. Explain to the audience the difference between being laid off and being terminated.
Well, yeah, that's a term that I hear a lot of tech workers, and I think, I can kind of relate to their situation, where I think they know, when they're telling you that they're laid off, that's a temporary term. But the true meaning of the word is that's temporary. Mm-hmm. And these people that I've known that got laid off never came back to that company again. That job was gone. Basically, they were terminated. And they might have been called back as a temporary worker with no benefits, and they weren't going to last at that company very long. They were just going to work on maybe a project and then never work there again. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's one of the most misused terms, at least in this town, and for a very nefarious reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's real good. We need to take a short break, and we'll be right back here. We need to take a short break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. We're now back. Thank you for joining us. I'm speaking with Kevin Caffrey, president of the Northern Colorado Labor Council, and we're discussing the topic of outsourcing American jobs and the effect that it has on small businesses all across Colorado. Kevin, on this segment, I'd like to ask you to talk about the Creating American Jobs and Ending Offshoring Act, what the Senate Democrats worked on at the end of 2010, please.
Yeah, Tim, the bill will included a payroll tax holiday for companies that bring jobs back to the United States, okay, from overseas. It ends tax breaks for plants that shut down and go offshore, and blocks companies from deferring their tax bill year after year by keeping the money out of the U.S. Sounds like good things to me.
Oh, absolutely. So the Republicans should have been all over this.
Oh, you would think that,
With the tax breaks.
Oh, absolutely. You would think that with the tax breaks, brings jobs back. It sounds pretty patriotic to me. Making something here, and the fact that it keeps us strong, keeps us the leader in manufacturing, which we've lost to China and to other countries. And you'd think that, that probably the largest organization, the largest one that represents small business and mostly big business, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, well, I guess they don't. They don't think it's a great idea, nor does the National Association of Manufacturing, NAM. And U.S. Chamber, which represents businesses in the United States, has aggressively battled the effort to reduce outsourcing. During the debate over the stimulus, the U.S. Chamber fought efforts to include a provision that would encourage taxpayer money to be spent on products made domestically. It's un-American. It's just crazy. I mean, do the small businesses that pay dues, remember, they're like a union, you have to pay dues in order to belong to the chamber, do they understand that the organization that they pay dues to, that they have a flag flying over their office here in Fort Collins and Washington, D.C., do they understand that organization and the National Association of Manufacturers are lobbying against this thing that will protect jobs, protect American families, keep us strong, keep us a leader in the world? That they're lobbying against this, I just find it outrage. And I hope our brothers and sisters in the Tea Party would find that outrage too. And I hope they watch this show and they call and write their congressperson, because I know I'm outraged by it.
Well, one other thing that I think is just as outrageous, there was a nasty rumor out there that there was even Senate Democrats that threatened to filibuster this act.
Well, you're exactly right. I'll give you the names. Max Baucus from Montana, the guy that didn't really want to hear about single payer and a public option when we were discussing health care last summer. Ben Nelson, a Democrat from Nebraska. Senator John Tester from Montana. Another fellow Montanan with his colleague Max Baucus, and Mark Warner, a senator from Virginia, and last but not least, a vice president candidate with Al Gore, Joe Lieberman, who is now a independent from Connecticut. I mean, these people, worked against having this bill come to the Senate and being voted on. It's an outrage, and we've got to do something about this, because if they really love America and they want this country to stay strong and for unemployment to go down, we've got to do something about this offshoring. I mean, it's killing our country.
Well, I thought it was interesting that it had to take an independent Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont, who made the comment, and I quote, "Much prefer paying people in Vietnam 20 cents an hour than American workers a living wage." I just think that is so profound that we have to rely on an independent to, now he does, caucus with the Democrats, I'll say that, but still, where are the Democrats that are standing up and picking up this banner and saying that we need to keep good paying jobs and keep the middle class here in the United States? I just think that's interesting.
Well, it's totally interesting. And another thing, I mean, you touched on Senator Sanders from Vermont. He's on Tom Hartman's show on Fridays. It's the longest running town hall meeting. Tom Hartman's on from 1 to 4. He's on a station that we get here in Fort Collins, and most of the Front Range does AM 760. And the first hour of every Friday, Tom Hartman, that manages the show, he's a moderator of the show. He calls him America's senator, even though he's an independent. And I'd have to concur with Tom, because this is a guy that champions saving and keeping Social Security strong. I mean, where's the Democrats doing this? I want them, and I know there are good Democrats that are doing this, but Senator Sanders has been a champion for the working people. He doesn't want this outsourcing. He doesn't want our jobs going to a third world country, so that we don't have the wherewithal for our families to buy and maintain homes and have the money to save for their kids' college education, that type of thing. So Bernie Sanders has just been a champion for the American people. I can't say enough good things about the guy.
I agree with you on that. Now, one thing I'd like to talk about is some of the specific corporations here in the United States that are shipping jobs overseas, yet are still saying how well they're doing here in the United States, that their record profits are up. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Well, I can name you two off the top of my head, and I think these are iconic companies that America would look at as, this is as American as you can get. One of them is Caterpillar, the iconic yellow, great big huge construction equipment stuff. They're bulldozers, the things that we used in both great world wars to build airstrips and foreign lands and that type of thing to have our country stay safe and independent. And now, they're going over to, they just built 2 new plants in China in the last 2 months to design and manufacture equipment. DuPont Chemical, they've shipped jobs overseas. They've shrank their employees in this country, while at the same time they shrank by almost 10% in this country, and they grew by 54% in the Asian and Pacific countries. I mean, this is just an outrage when we're looking for jobs in this country, and we have 2 iconic companies that are moving their jobs, and they say, well, why can't you hire people, and they act like, well, we're not, we're getting leaner and meaner. But yet, when you look at the true picture of these companies, they're hiring thousands of workers in other countries. Where's the patriotism? Make it here, and if you need trade laws to change, those 2 companies are very wealthy. They should be lobbying Washington to change our trade agreements so that they can stay competitive with American workers. That's what I think has to be done. Our trade agreements have to be changed so that it's equal trade and not giveaway trade and the so-called myth of free trade.
Mm-hmm. One other thing I thought was interesting, a comment that was made in the Huffington Post back in December of 2010, and it said, in a quote, by 2015, for the first time, the number of consumers in Asia's middle class will equal those in Europe and North America combined. Now, the reason I say that's significant is because it's fine, because that means that's more people for us to manufacture goods and sell to. But unfortunately, that's not the case, is it?
No, it's not the case at all. And all you have to do is go into your local J.C. Penney's or any of your outlet malls and try to go buy some American clothes. You can't find them. There's, iconic jean maker, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, their last plant where they made the blue jeans in this country closed down in San Antonio, and they moved to Mexico. Mm-hmm. So you can't even buy American clothes here anymore. And if we don't manufacture anything in this country anymore, how can we maintain our level of military prowess? I mean, if no one's making anything and we don't have people that are making livable wages, because what's left over is just a service sector, and it doesn't pay as well as manufacturing. So if we don't have anyone other than some Wall Street bankers and a few CEOs that are offshoring these jobs, making huge bonuses and hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and the rest of us are left to work entry-level work and low-paid jobs, minimum wage jobs, how are we going to be able to pay the taxes to keep our schools viable, to keep our universities so that our children, we can save enough money to have them go there and stay a world power? I don't see that it's sustainable in the direction we're going. We're going in the direction of a third world country where we take our natural resources and we load them up on a train, ship them to the coast, put them on a freighter, and send them to another country, to make something of value. That's not a path that's going to keep us a world power. We can't sustain this direction that we're going.
Yeah, that's interesting. One thing that Republicans like to talk about and conservatives is free trade. What's your opinion on free trade?
Well, it goes back to when we were children. We probably at one time believed in the tooth fairy and believed in Santa Claus. We both have grown up to know that there's nothing free. Santa doesn't really exist. Children, I'm sorry, I don't mean to crush you out there if you're watching this, but those are myths that there's nothing free. We've got to understand that when another country, let's say China or India, protects their manufacturing sector in their country and they don't allow us to export anything to them. Okay, let's say we still did make something, and we do. We make automobiles. We can't export a Chevrolet to China or India. They may want to buy them, but we can't export them there because by the time that car hits that country and the whatever the distributor would have to pay for the tariff there, it's not competitive with the domestic car that's being made in that country. So they protect their borders and their jobs and their manufacturing, whereas we just get everything dumped into this country and with like slave wages, just like Bernie Sanders said, Vietnamese workers working for 20 cents an hour. I have to ask the American worker, can you work? You can work for 20 cents an hour, but can you make a living at it? And can you maintain a middle-class lifestyle? Can you buy what a medium-price house in this town, as they're going down and down and down, but can you buy that with 20 cents an hour? I mean, the answer is a resounding no.
Well, I thought that was interesting. There was a Free Trade Doesn't Work interview with the economist Ian Fletcher, and this was back in December of 2010. And he made a comment where he said Alexander Hamilton, founding father and intellectual architect of American capitalism, was a protectionist. And protectionism was American policy from independence until after World War II. And one other thing that he stated I thought was profound was China's elite wants to build up its own country. The American elite is quite happy to let America gradually decline so long as they can make investments and money overseas. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on today. This was very interesting, and definitely like to bring you back on and talk more about how organized labor is relevant in 21st century America.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you inviting me.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions or comments about today's show, please go to nocoprogressives.com. You can also find us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. Until next time, and remember, stay progressive.